Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Eshomomo Imodu. Now, there has been renewed violence in the Central African Republic following religious conflicts. Over the weekend, at least 9 people were killed as violence rages between the majority Christian population and Muslims. Now, the Christians accuse the Muslims of having links to Selika rebels who took power last year and embarked on a 10-month occupation marked by alleged torture and murder. Now, the presence of 1,600 French soldiers and 5,000 African troops has failed to stop the violence despite the confiscation and destruction of seized weapons. Meanwhile, in faraway Hague, the International Criminal Court began the hearing of Africa's Terminator, Bosco Ntangada, to determine if he should stand trial for war crimes. Ntangada is accused of 13 counts of war crimes and 5 counts of crimes against humanity, including murder, coercing of children to become soldiers, and keeping women as sex slaves. Now, what should be done to ensure Africa is free from crisis? Share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC Africa Today or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv. We will take this report and Africa Today will be back. Thanks for joining us.
Again, the streets of Bangui boils. Renewed hostilities has resulted in the death of 1 person in Kilometer 5, a predominantly Muslim neighborhood. The anti-Balaka militia have been blamed for this gruesome execution. This incident adds to the Red Cross growing statistics of recovered bodies in the deepening conflict that has ripped apart the Central African Republic. The fighting continues. Sporadic gunshots are fired by armed groups. There is chaos on the streets. African peacekeepers take positions to counter retaliatory attacks. They appear fully aware of the risk here and have even called for reinforcement.
Internally, within the territory itself, the kinds of heavy massacre killings which we witnessed when we got here have actually subsided. We will not talk about a 100% situation of security now. That is far from the truth. But at least we are on a good footing, and we want to believe that with all the logistic support which we are expecting to have, we will do better than what we are doing now.
Apparently, there could be need for military reinforcement as the troops on the ground battle to restore peace. It's still a volatile situation in the Central African Republic. The streets of Bangui in recent times has also seen violence. Peacekeepers are also facing difficulties in tackling the situation. In some cases, they have even come under attack by armed militia groups. Femi Akonde, TVC News, Bangui.
Tens of thousands of Muslims have been fleeing Christian militia in the Central African Republic. Now, reports coming in says about 40,000 people have already escaped to neighboring Chad and Cameroon. Now, this also puts a lot of pressure on the new interim president, Catherine Samba-Panza, as she has just a year to end the nation's bloody sectarian strife. Now, joining us to look at the latest development in the Central African Republic and Bosco Ntangada's trial on Africa Today, we have Biodun Showome, now founder and an African affairs analyst. Now, and later on the show, we will be linking up with Connie Freeman. Now, Mr. Biodun, you're welcome to the show today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Now, let's take a look at it this way. Now, what will you make of the present crisis in the Central African Republic?
Oh, yeah. What is going on in Central African Republic is really worrying and very troubling for many Africans. When you take into consideration the fact that what started as a violence by a highly indisciplined Seleka Muslim group that took advantage of the coup, which removed Bozize, has now turned into a pure sectarian war. And we are beginning to see a situation where the Muslims residents are now being forced out of all their neighborhoods. Within a short time, thousands of people have been forced to flee to the neighboring countries. The borders between Cameroon, Chad, and Sudan and Central African Republic, in any case, is so porous because of the environmental factors around those areas and other economic considerations like people move across the borders easily in search of water. But what we're beginning to see now is that Central African Republic is being emptied of Muslims completely. This is not being done with the connivance of the new interim president. It's being done by the anti-Balaka group, the people they call the anti-machete. They are Christians.
Could it be a strategy to intimidate the acting president?
Well, I don't really think so. What I think is going on is the absence of justice in what has happened in Central African Republic, because all along what France and other African countries focus on is they try to patch it all up so that it won't explode, it won't get to this stage. That is why they allowed Yotodia to go on exile to Benin Republic. You know, they didn't bring Bozize back. There wasn't any form of a real national conference, you know, to engage the different people. And the role of the religious leaders, both the Muslims and Christians, they've all taken sides, you know, in a way that is not really helpful today. We need to have a frank, honest talk about what is going on in Central African Republic.
There should be a national conference.
There should be a form of, whether you call it a national conference on religious tolerance or on cohabitation, there should be one. Number two, the United Nations is also failing Africa in this situation. Having France with 1,600 troops to lead 5,000 other African nations' forces, you know, to calm what is, to pacify, you know, the troubles in a country bigger than the size of France, you know, is a joke. I mean, it's something you won't even, it's hardly enough to pacify 3 states in a country like Nigeria. So we need the United Nations to actually come in and try and restore order. A full UN mission is what is required.
A full UN mission.
A full UN mission is what is required, one, to protect the Muslim populations, you know, in Central African
Republic.
Republic.
Bring ultimate peace to the
bring
to the
order, security order, and also arrest the perpetrators of this crime.
Okay, I'll come back to you now. Now, joining us from the United States is Connie Freeman, now a professor at the Maxwell School, Syracuse University. Now, Professor, it's nice having you.
Hello.
Okay. Now, we hear security in the Central African Republic is in chaos. Now, what is wrong again?
Okay, the chaos has broken out again. I think because there is a lack of trust of the population, that they are secure, and so they are still striking out against each other. And it's difficult to maintain order. I gathered that there's been some discussion of engaging the International Criminal Court again, but that is an old story since the ICC has been engaged in one fashion or another in the CAR for more than a decade.
Now, why would you say that the rebels find it difficult to lay down their arms? Why do you think this has been very difficult?
I think that both the Christian militias and the Muslims find that the remainders of the Salaka find it difficult to trust each other after there has been so much internecine violence between them. And so they continue to strike out at each other. I think this is a fairly common residual when the violence has been unorganized and widespread and chaotic.
Before now, we actually thought that the former president was the problem of that country. But with what is happening now, what do you think is the problem of the people?
As I said, I think the primary problem of the people is they do not trust each other anymore. And so they strike out so that they will not be striked out against themselves. I also think that while this started out as a grapple for power and wealth, it has become deeply religious in the sense that it's identity groups, and that there is a belief among many of the Christian militias now that they need to cast all the Muslims out of the country in order to be safe.
Now, thank you so much for your time on this segment, and kindly stay on the line with us, and we'll get back to you shortly. Now, with elections due in February 2015 and the interim leader not allowed to stand, and the scale of the challenge facing Catherine Samba-Panza is huge. Now, she told journalists that she is determined to bring to book those doing the killing on both sides. Now, we'll go on a quick break, and Africa Today will be right back.
Prosecution will demonstrate that there are substantial grounds to believe that the crimes for which Bosco Ntangada is charged were neither random nor spontaneous. These were carefully planned, coordinated, and executed campaigns of violence deliberately targeting the Lendu and Giti populations and other non-Hema ethnic groups.
Now, at his hearing on in the International Criminal Court, the court was told that Bosco Ntangada, a Congolese militia leader widely known as the Terminator, led fighters including child soldiers in a campaign of ethnicity, motivated rape and murder, but he denies all of the allegations. Now, Bosco Ntangada has finally appeared at The Hague, where Bosco Ntangada finally appeared at The Hague, where we expect that his trial will commence. Now, what do you expect that will happen over there with on him?
Well, he's not at the stage of making a plea currently. The ICC has been looking for him. They've been all out for him for a long time now. I think as far back as 1996, you know, after the massacre of people and then the allegations of using child soldiers, which he actually integrated some of them into the Congolese army in 2009, is more likely going to decline to deny all the charges, because it actually tried to do that before the judge actually stopped him. That they were yet to get to the stage of whether I should take a plea or not. But the fact of the matter is, if you go back into history and understand what actually happened, you realize that he is actually a Tutsi, you know, from Rwanda. Following the trouble in Rwanda in 1994 genocide, he crossed into the Hutus. Thousands, about 800,000 Hutus fled into Democratic Republic of Congo. So he actually Terminator came into to Congo with some group of other generals, mostly sympathetic to the Tutsi's leadership in Rwanda, and then started the war against the Hutus and also against the Democratic Republic of Congo. That was how he started. He's not being charged in relation to his membership or his command of the M23 or the atrocities committed by the M23 rebels in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Is over the incident in the Ituri region. That's where all the 13 charges are in relation, you know, to the incidents in Ituri region where he's been accused of using women, you know, as slaves, you know, sex slaves.
After he surrendered in March last year, there was a rumor that the CAM actually returned back to the region. And do you agree with that?
In a sense, yes, but don't forget, people should, one fact which must not be forgotten is, why did Terminator surrender? That's a critical issue. The M23 leadership split. There was a split in the leadership.
So he was forced to surrender?
He was forced to, because he's safer with ICC than being on the street, because the other commanders will eliminate him. So that's one explanation for his decision to actually walk in and so give up himself. So, of course, things are likely going to go down, because there are some of the commanders, M23 commanders, who are fed up with the war. Some of them genuinely want the war to end. I don't think Terminator belongs to that group.
And Terminator does not want the war to actually end.
He has profited from it. and he was already wanted anyway, so before he gave himself in, so there was no way. If the war can continue, that will provide him some measure of security. Don't forget the Rwanda factor, because Rwanda all along was being accused by DRC of being involved in the war. They kept denying it, but at least we are beginning to see a link between what is going on in DRC, particularly in Eastern Congo, and the role of the Tutsi leadership in Rwanda.
Now, would you say that Ntangada is actually the main problem of DRC?
Ntangada is not just the main problem. There are other forces, there are other commanders who are actually, challenging the leadership in DRC, or who are not happy about what is going on. For instance, the trouble in the Kivu region is a good example. But they all came together under M23 with Ntangada, popularly known as Terminator, with his own separate agenda against the Hutus that fled into DRC.
Ntangada is already under arrest, and the situation in the DRC, is it still possible to raise another Ntangada if we don't really deal with the major reason why this conflict persists this far?
Yes, it is possible because you have the neighboring countries, Rwanda, Uganda, they're all there, and everyone is, all those countries are trying to have their own areas of influence. And particularly in the case of Rwanda, the United Nations or the African Union needs to actually get Rwanda and DRC leadership to start talking about how to end this crisis. It's quite very crucial because Rwanda keeps denying it, but you only need to not to look far. You can see some of the influences and some of you can see some of the actions of the Rwanda leadership is aiding. The crisis in Congo.
But I'll come back to you. Now, we've established contact with the professor. Now, Professor, should Africa rely on the ICC to give Bosco a fair hearing?
I think that this case has been in the works for almost a decade now. And the recent announcement was simply that they would undertake an investigation to decide whether they would hear this case. Let's remember that he turned himself in, and so he must have either some confidence in a fair hearing or at least believe that the ICC is better than the alternative.
No matter the outcome of the judgment, I'm saying that what do you think will become of Bosco, Ntangada, and the peace in Africa?
I'm not sure that the outcome of the ICC hearing of Ntangada is going to have a great impact upon the peace in Africa. One of the difficulties that we've seen over and over is that the intervention of the ICC into conflict cases sometimes increases the conflict rather than decreases it. It's your classic juxtaposition between peace and so-called justice. As with Coney, when leaders have nothing to look forward to except prosecution by the ICC, this can make them more rather than less rigid in terms of coming to a ceasefire or an agreement which will end conflict. On the other hand, many countries are not equipped or unwilling to prosecute their own war criminals.
Okay. Now, thank you so much, Professor, for being on the show, for your contribution on the show today. Now, let me come back to you, Biodo. Now, we talked about Bosco Ntangada having fair hearing. Now, how do you think we should tackle the issue of terrorism in Africa?
Yeah, the issue of terrorism is something that needs to be taken more seriously because it's not just with a national character. We now have terrorism with an international character and is wreaking havoc and creating problems in so many countries. But you cannot eliminate terrorism without eliminating the causes of terrorism. Causes of terrorism, gladly, in many parts of Africa can be traced to issues like poverty, unemployment, ethnic tension, sectarian tension, distrust, lack of democracy, on and on. So Africa itself needs to begin to deal with some of these issues, in piecemeal or as a whole, with a view to eliminate some of the causes of terrorism.
Let me just bring in what the professor actually said. She talked about the involvement of the ICC in most cases. Instead of reducing crisis in Africa, it helped to swell crisis.
Yes, what you see, the way ICC is being used by the international community is quite unfortunate. ICC is not necessarily pursuing justice. It's a tool over a period of time. It is increasingly becoming clear that it's a tool being used to pressure one party or the other to make concessions. That is, when you can't resolve issues behind the closed doors and people are digging in, then you get the ICC in and try and see whether you can get the ground softened. But that is when the international community is only after peace at all costs. But in terms of justice, the requirement of justice is totally different. If you have to do that, then you have to go all the way. Is all the parties involved? Like in the case of Central African Republic, both the Christian militias and the Muslim militias, all of them would have to be dealt with. It doesn't make sense singling out one section which you believe is recalcitrant. War crimes are war crimes. Crimes against humanity are crimes against humanity, no matter which party is involved. What is going on with Bosco now, Ntangada in DRC, is an attempt to now, following the split, to exploit the split, within the M23 leadership, to now see whether they can finally push, take away Bosco, whether we can now finally push for a negotiated settlement in DRC. But what happens to all the crimes committed in DRC till today are not issues, for ICC currently. That is what I mean by they are pursuing peace and not justice. Yeah.
And for how long do you think Africa can stay with these?
You cannot build a continent on nothing. It's not enough to have peace. There has to be justice. Justice is not only retributive justice. There has to be justice even in terms of how resources are located, in terms of access to employment, access to water. In Central African Republic, water is one of the major issues, for the northern part of the place. So the world has to come where you want to assist Africa. The nature of that engagement is very important. It has to address fundamentally things that the people need, not what the leadership needs.
Now that brings the issue of leadership in Africa. We're talking about Bosco Ntaganda, but it's like less is said about the leader, the man who was there when the crisis actually started.
Bozize. Yeah, when he was there, don't forget he is a Christian. He was removed through a coup. He has been in power for some time, backed also by the French. His removal was not democratic. We should have insisted, France and other African countries should have insisted that Bozize should be returned back to power and then conduct an internationally supervised election,
even when the people are not satisfied with him.
Well, the people were not satisfied with Bozize, but what we had under Bozize was is totally different from what we have today. Today is total anarchy, chaos. Chaos. CAR has failed today because they've nearly emptied the Muslim population of CAR, from that country today. And killings are going on. People are just being mindless killing. Even people were killed in front of soldiers simply because they are Muslim. That can't be allowed. That country has failed. So something has to be done urgently. And I believe that the United Nations need to, deploy a full mission into CAR, take over the affairs of CAR, restore peace, security, and protect, both the Muslims and the Christians.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure.
I appreciate this. Now, the International Criminal Court, 11 years old this year, has handed down just one conviction, jailing another Congolese warlord. Now, Thomas Lubanga, for 14 years in 2012 for using child soldiers. Now, the Hague Court has also said that it will open a preliminary examination into crimes, including killings, acts of rape, and sexual slavery, allegedly committed during the conflict in the Central African Republic. But the big question is, who will be held accountable for these crimes? That's our show for today. You can also watch previous episodes of the show online at www.youtube.com/TVC Africa Today. Till we come your way again next time, I am Eshomomo Imodu. And remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.